This is Lieutenant Colonel Dodge. Lieutenant Colonel, what would you like to say on today's video topic? Oh no. Hey, I've got a question for you. When was the last time you saw a bison? If you live in America, the answer is, well, it's probably not recently. Maybe a trip to Yellowstone? Or maybe you're a rancher. But for most of you, the answer wasn't, oh, just last Friday on the way to the general store. The bison used to be something that you just could not escape past Appalachia. Estimates put the bison population at around 60 million in the late 18th century. For the vast majority of human history, the bison was a seemingly permanent feature of the North American continent. Then, this happened. And then this. In 100 years, the American bison total population went from an estimated 60 million to less than 300 individuals. Why? Well, it's a little complicated, but there were two main factors: money and racism. It's a tale as old as time, really. The economy will get what the economy wants, and at that time, what the economy wanted was dead bison. This is a buffalo tongue, and apparently, it's really good, like really delicious. So delicious, in fact, that it was the only part worth keeping most of the time. Yes, you heard me right. In many, many cases, bison hunters, usually the white ones, would kill the animals just to take their tongues. In one instance, a military general and some prestigious guests went bison hunting for sport. Quote, "The party killed over 600 buffalo on the hunt, keeping only the tongues and choice cuts, but leaving the rest of the carcasses to rot on the plains." Close quote. Buffalo tongue at the time was considered a delicacy by whites and natives alike, and Westerners would spend a pretty penny to get their hands on it. It wasn't just the tongues, though. Hides, pelts, and bison leather were all valuable commodities. Adjusted for inflation, every hide was worth about $20 to $65 US, and if you can kill 600 in one sitting, it's pretty easy to see where the appeal came from. And then there was sport. If there's one thing we remember correctly about the American West, it's that people really liked shooting things. Generally speaking, if there was a lot of something, and it was easy to shoot, it's not much of a stretch to guess that some Westerners probably made a sport out of hunting it. This is a passenger pigeon. Have you ever seen one before? No, you haven't. And yet, there used to be just so fucking many of them. One historic estimate put their population before the 19th century at around 3 to 5 billion. And then it was hunted to extinction. Why? Well, partly just because it was fun. It was considered an amateurish bird to hunt, something that was so easy to kill that it wasn't really anything to brag about, but it was still commonly used in shooting competitions. Have you ever heard of a clay pigeon? One of these things? It gets shot out of a machine and then you see if you can hit it. It's great fun. I've done it before. But the thing is, the pigeons didn't used to be clay. Back then, when live birds were the only way to have these sorts of competitions, the passenger pigeons were the kings. In one competition, to claim the prize, you needed to kill 30,000 of them. It wasn't just sport that led to the extinction of the passenger pigeon, of course. Settlers used such a readily available source of meat for food, of course. But when you have competitions taking out tens of thousands of the birds just for the fun of it, you kind of start to have a problem. And it's not hard to see why the same thing would be a problem for the bison as well. There were also railroads to consider. If you wanted to travel any long distances in the 1800s, well, it's going to be a few days. And if it's anywhere in the West, it's going to be a few weeks. Now, let's say a herd of bison decides to stop on the tracks. What do you do about that? Well, as a passenger, unless you brought your gun, you kind of just have to wait it out. But for the railroad companies, this becomes a serious problem. It wasn't only that to consider either. Railroads mean a massive jump in accessibility to anywhere they go. The same was even more true back then. If somewhere is accessible, and if there's something as lucrative as bison to hunt there, you're going to attract some attention. And that's what we saw. Anywhere the railroads went, bison hunters quickly followed, and the area's local herds were exterminated relatively quickly. This made the railroads happy, and it made the hunters a profit. So, commercial incentives, railroads, and hunting for sport. Take them all together, and you have a pretty convincing set of reasons why the bison almost went extinct, right? I could have left the video there, and many of you would have been satisfied. Many articles have made that argument in the past. The problem is, well, that's not the whole story. I haven't even talked about the racism yet. So, I opened the video with a very loaded quote. Remember this guy? And that quote, as loaded as it might have seemed, really was pretty emblematic of the sentiment in many of the military higher-ups at the time. One of the biggest quote-unquote problems facing the military at the time was the so-called Indian question. Ugh. And if you know a little bit about American history, you know exactly what the problem was. America looked like this, but it wanted to look like this. The thing is, there was already a bunch of people in the way, living their lives and such. So, the US government busted out the reservations. Except, why would Native people go onto these reservations of their own free will? Well, most of them wouldn't, and most of them didn't. So, from the American military command's perspective, the military had to force them. Big problem, though. Big problem. Direct military conflict didn't really work. The natives knew the land better and could easily escape any direct attacks with relative ease. So, what was their solution? Did they simply abandon their expansionist desires and live at peace for the betterment of humanity? Did they give up their racist views? Well, here's how the military command said it. Quote, "If he, the Plains Indian, does not give up his cruel and destructive ways, I see no other way to save the lives and property of our people than to punish him until peace becomes a desirable object." Just gross. Just gross stuff. Just like movie villain stuff. And how are they going to make peace a desirable object? Well, they kill off the food supply. And they were pretty fucking direct about it. For the sake of time and my own sanity, I'm not going to read these out loud, but go ahead, give the video a pause. It's heinous. It is heinous. For those of you who can't be bothered or value your own sanity more than I value mine, fair enough. Long story short, the US military couldn't beat the natives into submission through traditional warfare, so they took it out on the American bison. Military personnel used bison as target practice. There are reports of artillery being used to kill a passing herd, and just like with the commercial example, military personnel would often report killing hundreds of bison in a single sitting. Yes, there is the risk of embellishment here, just like with any historical report, but even a fraction of the numbers reported would account for a massive chunk of the cause for the bison to go nearly extinct. The military incentives and the commercial incentives often intersected as well. For example, what do you do if you're a buffalo runner and the local area has run out of buffalo to run? Well, you go where there's buffalo, right? Not so fast. Treaties like the one signed at Medicine Lodge granted the Kiowas, Comanches, Southern Cheyennes, and Arapahoes hunting rights in specific areas. So, in this specific instance, buffalo runners, fearing federal punishment, went to ask the military what would happen to them for breaking the treaty. And you, dear viewer, already know what happens next, because the man they went to see was Lieutenant Colonel Dodge, the guy from the beginning of the video. And you already know what his response was. Kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. Things generally continued in this manner. The bison attracted runners and military. The bison of an area were hunted until their populations dried up. Much of the animals' corpses were left to rot on the plains, and the cycle repeated itself. For many animals in similar situations, these sorts of patterns just repeat themselves over and over again until there are no more animals to hunt. Luckily, that's not how this story ended. We still have the American bison today, and to my knowledge, there aren't roving bands of buffalo runners looking to find their next meal of buffalo tongue. Conservation efforts were made, and eventually gained enough of a foothold that the animal wasn't wiped out completely. Today, the bison population hovers at around 500,000, much lower than the original 600 million, but much, much better than the low point of 300 individuals that the bison population at one point reached. But 500,000 is still just a fraction of what once was. Hey, thanks for watching. I left my sources in the description. I had to leave out a lot of interesting stuff just for the sake of time, really. I really would encourage you do some further reading on the topic. There is some fascinating stuff out there by people a lot smarter than me. But anyway, if you enjoyed, please do the YouTube stuff, I guess. Like leave a like and subscribe and stuff. I really enjoyed making this video. And if there's any interest, I'm so excited to make more. I'll probably make more anyway. Fuck you. But no, not fuck you. I love you. Whether you liked the video or not, though, thanks for getting to the end. And have a good one, everyone.